Hey, what's going on YouTube? This is Devin coming back at you with another video today on PubStomp MTG, and in this video today I wanted to focus on a new series that I'm developing on my channel, and that's a guide to creature types. So this is a new series, not so new because recently over the summer I did make a guide to Eldrazi, and so if you haven't checked that video out, I'll post the link above here. But aside from that, I had a blast making that, and I do want to make more of them, and so I have a couple ideas in my head as far as what creature types to pick at first. And so I thought about dragons, I thought about elves, I thought about merfolk, I thought about dragons. There's a lot of cool creature types that I do want to uncover in this channel. I think I mentioned dragons twice, but dragons are a great option too. But aside from that, in this video today, I wanted to kick things off and focus on dinosaurs. So dinosaurs are one thing that I absolutely cherish in the world. I've been a dinosaur fanatic ever since I was young, knowing all sorts of dinosaur names when I was young. And so of course, in this video today, I wanted to focus on them. However, before I do start this video, I do want to shout out my newest sponsor of the channel, and that's Arcane Fortress. This is an amazing deck box that I stumbled upon, and I wanted to shout out because I feel like there's a lot of personal touches that I do find enjoyable about this. For example, I'm a big red player at heart, and so I decided I needed to get the red box first, and it has a cool fire emblem. And also, there is a really cool background and a backdrop for when you open the box. This one has a mountain with a sun in the background. There are other color options that you can choose from. For example, there's black, green, blue, and white. So, of course, you can kind of personalize it to the commander of your choice. Of course, my commander in here is a Tali Primal Conqueror, and so I do trust this deck box with my life, and I trust it enough to protect my cards too, because say, for example, I hold onto this and I don't have the magnets touching my hand, I could just let it go and then I could just shake it really hard. I would say I'm shaking it harder than the professor, but maybe I'm not. I know he shakes his boxes pretty hard in his reviews, but I feel like this is a very sturdy box that I feel like that I'm pretty comfortable keeping my most expensive cards in, because Atali, I will say, is my most expensive deck. Also, it does have a detachable point where you could put a lot of dice and also other accessories you can in there, so this is a very good option as far as the deck box go. Make sure to check out my link down below in the description. You could either use my discount code, or you could just use the link to go to the website and pick the box of your choice. You won't regret it. This is absolutely an amazing box. Speaking of Atali and speaking of dinosaurs, let's get back into the video. So when discussing dinosaurs, they were first introduced in Ixalan. Technically, there were dinosaurs in the past Magic. They were errated from lizards or beasts into dinosaurs later on. However, Ixalan was the first set to introduce dinosaurs to us. There were other sets that followed after Ixalan that did include dinosaurs. The most notable ones that I could think of is Dominaria, Core 19, Ikoria, Lair of Behemoths, Phyrexia All Will Be One, and March of the Machine, and of course the newest set, Lost Caverns of Ixalan with Jurassic World. So within those planes, there's a lot of awesome and exciting dinosaur commanders and dinosaurs in the 99 that you could choose from. The most dominant color combination for dinosaurs is the Naya color combination of green, red, and white. Thanks to the threefold sun in Ixalan, those color combinations are the most prominent colors for dinosaurs. The most notable commanders are Gishath, Sun's Avatar, Pantlaza, Sun Favored, Atla Palani, Nest Tender, Zakama, Primal Calamity, Waita, Trainer Prodigy, and Huatli, Poet of Unity. In that order, from Gishath, Sun's Avatar from being the most popular dinosaur commander to Huatli, Poet of Unity being the lowest rated commander. This is of course by popularity, not necessarily by power level, because I do feel like Pantlaza, Sun Favored out of the Naya color combination is probably the most explosive, at least in my opinion. But if you're trying to get the best dinosaur experience for your commander deck, I feel like Pantlaza, Sun Favored, or even Gishath, Sun's Avatar will be your best bet out of these color combinations. There are some striking differences between Pantlaza and also Gishath. Pantlaza, I feel like, has a great floor, but Gishath does have a better ceiling. Of course, there are some striking differences between the two. With Gishath, he does cost 3 more than Pantlaza. That is a lot. Of course, you can ramp into Gishath if you do want to, so that you can get more of an explosive turn when you do swing in with Gishath, because Gishath does have an incredible ability of when he deals combat damage, you can put any number of dinosaurs based off of the amount of damage you dealt with Gishath to that player. So of course, very explosive, especially paired with cards that could give a double strike. So Gishath is a very fun commander by its own right, but I feel like Pantliza kind of outweighs Gishath in a way where I feel like, again, it has that floor where you can constantly get those ETB triggers of discovering based off the toughness of dinosaurs that enter the battlefield. But really, it is up to you and what kind of play patterns you do want to have in your deck. Do you want to have more explosive turns with Gishath, or do you want more of a grounded gameplay with Pantliza? It really is up to you. However, outside of the Naya combination, there were also other Elder Dinosaurs that were introduced in Ixalan, or should I say rivals of Ixalan. First up, we gotta call 1-800, are you flapping? Because we got Zatalba Primal Dawn. This one is basically just keyword soup, better in the 99 than as a commander itself. I mean, don't get me wrong, it is very powerful, having Flying, Double Strike, Vigilance, Trample, and Indestructible as a 4/8 body, but in mono white, it isn't the best option for you as a dinosaur commander. Following that, we do have Nezahal Primal Tide, which is a card draw machine, especially in Commander when each opponent are casting non-creature spells left and right. Plus, it does have a way to protect itself by discarding cards, so this is a good option. Again, with this and all the Elder Dinosaurs, I feel like they are better in the 99 than as a commander themselves. However, following Nezahal, there is also Tetsumak Primal Death. This one isn't played as much, probably not really played at all, I'm just being honest. I don't really look at this card too much when making a dinosaur deck because usually black is not really a dinosaur color combination that you see too often. However, can be useful in some situations in other decks. From the least played to the most played Elder Dinosaurs, Atali Primal Storm is absolutely incredible in many red decks and many multicolor decks, of course in the 99. Also as a commander itself, it's probably the most viable out of these monocolored Elder Dinosaurs. It does have a pretty crazy attack trigger, essentially stealing your opponent's decks when you're attacking with it. Plus it does have a alternate art secret lair that I absolutely love with the Tyrannosaurus Rex. I know a Tyrannosaurus Rex reskinned a Spinosaurus doesn't make sense. However, I do love the art. Again, to reemphasize, Atali Primal Storm is the most playable out of these commanders, at least in my opinion. But the last Elder Dinosaur that is in monocolors that I do want to talk about is Galta, of course. This is the biggest one out of them all, being a 12/12 body and could potentially be reduced to just 2 green mana. That by itself is pretty insane. I feel like this is the second most playable out of the bunch because, of course, it's just a big dinosaur that you could just swing in with a lot of commander damage for. Not only that, it does have an alternate art with a special guest frame, which absolutely looks stunning. One of my favorite arts of all time. Just Galta looking absolutely menacing. But of course, there are some newer versions of our Elder Dinosaur, specifically Galta getting 2 different new cards from March of the Machine and also Lost Caverns of Ixalan. What's really fascinating about Galta and Mavern is the fact that you could go either tall with a big giant creature that you can make a token of, or you could go wide with a lot of little vampires. Of course, if you are a dinosaur tribal specifically in this option, you want to go for the big dinosaurs, but obviously, you could go whichever direction you want to go with this specific one. And with Galta's Stampede Tyrant, this is just a crazy effect of having all the creatures come for your hand onto the battlefield directly when you do play Galta as a ETB. So you can flicker this, you can do all sorts of shenanigans with this so that you could just cheat big giant dinosaurs into play. This is just a really awesome card. Aside from that, I do want to talk about possibly one of my favorite commanders of all time, and that's Atali Primal Conqueror. I have been playing this ever since it got released in March of the Machine, and this does not disappoint. This is absolutely crazy. Having a great front side of stealing your opponent's library, and also the backside being a Blightsteel Colossus as a win condition. Either side is absolutely crazy to ramp into. You could either play this as a high power 2 CDH build if you want to, or you could just play dinosaurs with it as a Gruul commander. Both options are pretty good because I feel like you could cheat into a lot of big dinosaurs with Atali in that ETB. However, with my personal deck, I do run it as a CDH commander using cards like Food Chain, Squee the Immortal so that you could essentially win the game off of that, or Dockside and Temur Sabertooth abilities so that you could repeat the process of getting that ETB. However, I will say this is a salt-inducing commander if you do play in a casual table, so just forewarning there because a lot of people might groan when they see it. But for me personally, I do love this commander. I absolutely adore what it does, and so of course I'm going to be keeping it for the years to come. So that is the set that possibly has the most dinosaur commanders. The other commanders I'm going to be mentioning here are miscellaneous from different areas of Magic, whether you're talking about Ikoria, Jurassic World, or other miscellaneous sets. But I do want to discuss Ikoria because honestly, it was one of my favorite sets. Not only does it have big giant monsters, which by the way I do love, it did introduce Godzilla to the multiverse as a Universes Beyond product, but what made Ikoria absolutely special was mixing all sorts of creature types together, making a big giant Frankenstein monster, for example. With Snapdak's Apex of the Hunt, it is a dinosaur cat nightmare, and there's a lot of other types of combinations like this that made it so interesting. The fact that it does have the dinosaur typing but does not look like a dinosaur is a little weird, but I could get behind it because of course they're just mixing all sorts of dinosaurs and other combinations of creatures together. For example, in the Godzilla treatment, we did get Snapdak's Apex of the Hunt with King Caesar, Rodan as Vadrock, and King Ghidorah as Aluna Apex of Wishes. These commanders have that ability of Mutate, which personally I don't like because it feels like a one-off to get that trigger of Mutate unless you have other Mutate support in the deck, which feels a little clunky in my opinion. So unfortunately, I'm not a big fan of these as far as design perspective. I wish they could kind of go back to the Monsterverse, maybe introduce Legendary Godzilla and some of the other creatures that were in those films as a new secret lair or another set by itself, because the new movie's coming out and I'm super excited for it. So obviously I would love that, but of course we do have these Mutate cards, which again I'm not a big fan of because I feel like they're very one-dimensional build-arounds. Speaking of Godzilla, we do have Xylortha Strength Incarnate or Godzilla King of the Monsters. They did get a Commander Masters reprint of this as the other art, which is pretty cool, but of course I'm more of a fan of Godzilla, so I love this art. Unfortunately, the power level of this card isn't to my standards, at least for my opinion. You might like this commander, but I personally feel like it's a little underpowered for what Godzilla is. However, lastly, I do want to talk about commanders that came out of Ikoria with Calmex the Stormsire and also Karuga the Macrosage. When these were first introduced, I actually had a deck with Calamax and also Karuga as the companion. The idea of this deck was going that dinosaur theme. On top of that, having a lot of instants and sorceries that could pump up my dinosaurs, so when a Calamax is tapped, I could copy those spells to pump up my dinosaurs even further so that I could go for lethal damage. I did scrap the deck, however, because I felt like it was a little clunky having spells mana value 3 or greater because of Karuga. But to be quite fair, this was a very casual deck, just putting a lot of teamer dinosaurs on the battlefield, pumping them up with Calamax by copying spells, and then going ahead swinging away and potentially getting a lot of card draw out of Karuga. So it was a very fun but slow deck, to be quite honest. But there is the idea if you do want to go for it. There is also another dinosaur from Ikoria with Akim, but we don't talk about Kim. So I'm just going to move along and talk about Thrasta. This is, I don't know what plane it is from. It is from Modern Horizons 2, but this could be potentially pretty fast, having that ability to be reduced by 3 mana for each spell that you cast this turn besides Thrasta. So I've seen people play this as you play a lot of fast mana or even cards like Jeweled Lotus to get this out early on so that you can get a lot of commander damage because it does have Trample, Haste, and is a 7/7 body. But I do find this more underwhelming compared to the other commanders, so I'm not going to talk about this one too much. However, I do want to move on to possibly one of my favorite parts of this section, and that's talking about Jurassic World commanders. There were 3 notable ones that were dinosaurs that I do want to talk about, with the Indoraptor, also Indominus Rex, and Blue and Owen. I kind of matched Blue and Owen together because of course they're partners with each other, so I feel like they count as one commander. But I do feel like all these can be fun as dinosaur specific commanders. Indoraptor specifically focusing on the Enrage ability that was in Ixalan the first time around. You can make the Indoraptor itself enraged or put a lot of enraged dinosaurs in the deck so that you could take a full advantage of those damage enablers. Also with the Indominus Rex, you have that ability to discard cards into the graveyard as long as they have keywords, so that then you could put a bunch of abilities on the Indominus Rex to make it the perfect alpha creature. You can lean into more of a reanimator strategy with the Indominus Rex because of course you're discarding cards, and then if you had a reanimate spell in your hand, you could just reanimate those big dinosaurs from the graveyard onto the battlefield so that you could really take over the game. However, if you were going to go with a more dino-centric commander, I would say Blue and Owen would probably be your best bet because they focus on dinosaurs the most, especially with blue putting all sorts of counters on dinosaurs that enter the battlefield. But I'll tell you what, I've had so much fun with blue and Owen, possibly one of my favorite dinosaur decks that I've had to play. They just curve nicely into each other, with Owen being a 3-drop and then blue being a 4-drop. Of course, you could put a haste counter on blue so that you could swing right away with blue, and all your dinosaurs after that will have haste. If you do want a more in-depth guide to blue and Owen, I do have a deck tech. I'll post the link above here so that you can go check it out for yourself. Of course, I'm just doing more of a summarization here. However, those are mainly the commanders I did want to point out. Of course, this is more of a general overview of all the legendary creatures, or I should say most of the legendary dinosaurs that you can pick as commanders. If I had to give a ranking as far as the best 3 commanders go, I would say Gishath, also Pantliza, and Blue and Owen would be your best shot. Depending on what kind of game style you want to play with, I feel like those are your best options. But honestly, don't let me dissuade you from picking other commanders. If you want to go for Godzilla, King of the Monsters, you go for it. Or if you want to go for a monocolored deck, that's completely fine. You pick the playstyle you feel like is most beneficial for you and your deck that you're going to be building. So now that I've talked about the commanders, now I want to focus on the meat and the potatoes of the deck. Of course, I want to focus first on dinosaurs that you should put in the 99. I've talked a little bit about some of the legendary creatures previously, like Atali or Nezahal that could be in the 99 of your deck. However, with these are not going to be legendary creatures whatsoever. I feel like these will just be great fits in any of your dinosaur decks. But first, I do want to focus on color combinations because, of course, I feel like Gruul is probably the best known color combinations for dinosaurs, because with green and red, I found that most dinosaurs fit in those color combinations. So if you are picking a commander, make sure that you might want to focus on those color combinations more than the others. Another thing to consider in the 99 is picking the right theme for your deck. The first time we went through Ixalan, we did have the Enrage mechanic, which is a good mechanic if you're really focusing on that. Let's just go into a hypothetical situation. Say, for example, you pick Gishath as your Enrage commander. Nothing wrong with that, but you can get a little bit more optimized by using a card like Weta, Trainer Prodigy that doubles your Enrage triggers. So if you do dive into the option of Enrage, I do feel like Weta, Trainer Prodigy would be your best bet. I do feel like the Indoraptor is another interesting option because it does have Enrage itself. So diving into some Enraged dinosaurs, I thought of Ranging Raptors, which will ramp you ahead whenever it's dealt damage. Same could be said for Ripjaw Raptor. It has that amazing ability to draw a card each time it's dealt damage. The more damage you could stack onto it without dying, the more card draw you could possibly get. Some other notable dinosaurs that you could take advantage of with Enrage is Trapjaw Tyrant and also Apex Allosaur. I wanted to focus on these two specifically because they act as removal. I love Trapjaw Tyrant specifically because it does have that ability to exile any creature on the battlefield, so if somebody has an Avacyn, goodbye to that Avacyn if it's dealt damage. But if you just want to destroy a creature, Apex Allosaur will get the job done because it's a 10/10, it does have that Enrage ability. And if you do have a way to give it indestructible, you could clear the whole entire board, leaving Apex Allosaur standing. Of course, I did also want to mention the most infamous enraged dinosaur, and that's Polyraptor. It basically makes a copy of itself each time it's enraged, so if your Polyraptor does get damaged, you can make 2 copies of it, and if both of those get damaged, you get to make 4 copies of it total. And essentially, the more Polyraptors you do get damaged, the more you're going to be putting on the battlefield each time. Of course, this is part of an infamous combo with Marauding Raptor. Basically, Marauding Raptor reads whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, it deals 2 damage to it. So when Polyraptor enters the battlefield, it'll deal 2 damage to Polyraptor, which will make another token copy of Polyraptor, which that token copy will be damaged by Marauding Raptor. This will present an infinite loop of making infinite Polyraptors because of Marauding Raptor's ability. So if you don't have a way to stop this loop, the game will end in a stalemate. So if you do plan on making this combo happen, you need to have an outlet of some kind to win the game. If you're using like a Perforos, or use the new card Wrathful Raptors. Whenever a dinosaur you control is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to any other target that's not a dinosaur. But outside of the combo, Marauding Raptor and Wrathful Raptors provide great utility. Marauding Raptor having that ability of reducing the cost of our dinosaurs, and Wrathful Raptors potentially being a game ender depending on how much damage we deal to our dinosaurs. Another method you can use while building your dinosaur deck is going a big and splashy theme. What I do mean by that is there's a lot of dinosaurs that have a lot of great ETBs or some things kind of similar to that. A dinosaur that I do want to highlight that does enable those big splashy plays is using a card like Hunting Velociraptor. It does have that ability. Dinosaur spells you cast have Prowl 2 and a red. The potential of this card is quite insane. Imagine having a Galta Stampede Tyrant in your hand and potentially it could just cost 2 and a red instead of that 8 mana. Or even imagine having a Zakama Primal Calamity in your hand. You could cast that for the alternate cost and still get that ETB cast trigger. Seriously, the potential on this card is quite crazy. Depending on what you have in your hand, this could be game over for your opponents. Some other dinosaurs I do want to highlight that have great utility effects are Awakening Sun's Avatar, Cresting Mosasaurus, and Grim Giganotosaurus. In a way, these all kind of act similar, where they act as a board wipe, where Awakening Sun's Avatar will destroy all non-dinosaur creatures. In a similar sense with Cresting Mosasaurus, it's basically a whelming wave for your dinosaurs, returning all creatures to their hand that are not dinosaurs. And if you do activate that ability of Grim Giganotosaurus to make it monstrous, you can destroy all artifacts and all creatures on the battlefield besides this. So of course, depending on what color combination you are playing in your commander deck with dinosaurs, these are great fits for those perspective decks. Some other dinosaurs that have great utility effects that I do want to highlight is Runic Armosaur. Depending on how much opponents have activated abilities of creatures or lands, as long as it's not a mana ability, you could draw a lot of cards out of this. Another great card advantage outlet I do want to mention is Curious Altosaur, because whenever a dinosaur you control deals combat damage to a player, you draw cards. So if you have like 5 dinosaurs on the battlefield, you're just going to be drawing 5 cards when you deal combat damage. That's simple enough. This is an auto-include in any dinosaur deck to come. If you do want to get some extra lands on the battlefield in the early game, Wayward Sawtooth will be the best option for you because it has that ability of playing additional lands during your turns. But next up, if you do want to get rid of pesky enchantments or artifacts, Scion of Calamity will get the job done for you, because when it deals combat damage to a player, you destroy target artifact or enchantment that player controls, and of course it has that Myriad ability so that you can make 2 additional copies, swinging at the other opponent so that you could get rid of pesky artifacts or enchantments like I mentioned previously. However, if you do want more utility out of your creatures, Tranquil Throwback is absolutely amazing, very underrated in my opinion. Obviously, a lot of people don't like paying extra mana into this, but if you cheat it in somehow, you could just pay into that green mana so you could do 1 of 3 things, or all 3 of them if you really wanted to, depending on how much mana you do have. You could destroy a target artifact or enchantment, exile a target player's graveyard, especially if they do have a reanimator strategy, and you could gain 4 life. Again, I find this a very underrated card that a lot of people should give a try. Also, I did want to quickly highlight Bronzebeak Foragers. This is an excellent removal spell. It has a great ETB, exiling up to 3 target non-land permanents that are on the battlefield. Of course, if this does get removed, all those things that you did exile will enter the battlefield again, so obviously it does have that backup plan of putting those cards you exile with it into the graveyard and gaining some life, so overall, I love this card. So of course, I talked about dinosaurs that have great utility. However, let's focus on dinosaurs that could actually close out the game. First up, I do want to talk about a dinosaur dragon hybrid with Bonehorde Dracosaur. So what makes this card excellent in any dinosaur deck is the fact, for one, it'll put dinosaurs on the battlefield for you, and 2, will put treasures on the battlefield, depending on what you exile at the beginning of the upkeep. But there is no reason why this card should be so good. For 5 mana, it has flying and first strike, being a 5/5 body. That by itself is really good, but having that ability to exile the top 2 cards of your library, being able to play them, then potentially make a treasure or exile the top 2 cards of your library, it's just ridiculous. That's all I could say. Next up, I do want to talk about Flaming Tyrannosaurus. So this one is quite interesting. I feel like in most situations you may not be playing from an exile theme, but if you do have Pantliza Sunfavored as your commander, this is going to be a ridiculous include and probably one of the best cards you can be playing in that deck. Of course, if you're playing things from exile, and that's pretty easy to do if you have like Bonehorde Dracosaur and your commander out, you could just be casting spells from anywhere other than your hand pretty easily, dealing 3 damage to any target, then putting a 1/1 counter on Flaming Tyrannosaurus. Plus, depending on the board state, a lot of people might not want to remove this card because when it does die, it deals damage equal to its power to each opponent. So say for example, this had a total of 10 power on the battlefield and it does die, it'll deal 10 damage to each opponent. That could literally be be quite game ending for some people. But I do want to focus on another dinosaur from Doctor Who, and that's Dinosaurs on a Spaceship. So this does have that suspend ability, so it could potentially be cheaper, but not by much. This is basically a anthem for your dinosaurs. Other dinosaurs you control get +1/+1 and have vigilance and trample. And plus it's a 7/7, has vigilance and trample, all for 6 mana. So that by itself is pretty crazy, but if it is suspended, whenever you remove a time counter, you're basically going to be making 2/2 red and white dinosaur creatures on the battlefield with flying and haste. So that by itself, you could put a lot of bodies on the battlefield, then eventually put this on the battlefield, buffing them all up. And because you're playing dinosaurs, most likely they will have trample, so why not take advantage of that with Quartzwood Crasher? I'll tell you what, this puts some serious pressure on your opponent's life total. Essentially, whenever one or more creatures you controlled with trample deal combat damage to a player, you create an XX green dinosaur beast creature token with trample, where X is the amount of damage those creatures dealt to that player. So basically, if you swing with this, you deal 6 damage to an opponent, and it does have trample. You're essentially making a 6/6 body on the battlefield with trample. And if you, say for example, on the next turn you swing with both of them and you connect with an opponent, you're going to be making a 12/12, depending on if anybody blocked with any creatures. So basically, this is going to be an avalanche, making a bigger creature each time you swing with it. Speaking of fun and scary creatures, I do also want to mention Tyrannex Rex. So honestly, I love this card. I feel like having a Phyrexian dinosaur on your side is really cool. Plus, it could be a game ender because of that Toxic 4 ability. If you connect with your opponent in any way, say for example somebody chump blocks with a 7/7 and you still connect with that person because of that trample ability, you will still give them 4 poison counters. So basically 3 swings away and opponent could potentially be dead with Tyrannex Rex. And the last game ending dinosaur I do want to highlight to you is Ravenous Tyrannosaurus. I'll tell you what, this is one of my favorite cards of all time. Not only am I a Jurassic Park fan, but also the art is breathtaking, and this is just a really good card overall. Especially the more creatures you do have on the battlefield, the more you could grow this into a bigger threat. So this is a relatively new card, and honestly I've played about 10 games with it, and when it goes on the battlefield, it makes an immediate impact, especially if you give it haste. There's a situation where I was playing my blue and Owen deck, and I put Ravenous Tyrannosaurus on the battlefield because blue had trample and haste. Ravenous Tyrannosaurus also got those attributes. I sacrificed a lot of creatures on my battlefield, and I made this into a 21/21 with trample and haste, and I swung at somebody, basically killing them, and targeted somebody else with that second ability of when it does attack, it deals damage equal to its power up to one other target creature. Excess damage is dealt to that creature's controller instead. I think that person had like a 5/5 on the battlefield, and they only had like 14 life, and so I dealt 21 damage to that creature and dealt the excess to their face and won that game. So you seriously haven't lived if you haven't played the Ravenous Tyrannosaurus. What an excellent include in any dinosaur deck to come. But with all that said, that's going to do it for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming by and watching this guide to dinosaurs. So again, this is a new series that I'm planning on doing for a lot of different creature types. Of course, I did it previously with Eldrazi and now with dinosaurs. Which creature type would you like to see next for me to make a guide on? I am trying to branch out of deck techs. Of course, I am still going to be making deck techs on my channel, but I want to focus on other things like this and other gameplay content. Let me know down below in the comments, what other content would you like to see? I'm pretty open as I want to try new things. However, going back to this video, of course, dinosaurs is by far my favorite creature type in Magic the Gathering, and honestly, one of my favorite things to talk about. I could talk about this for hours, but of course, I don't want to waste your time too much with this. I wanted to focus on a guide for you to see what kind of things will work. I did not include every single dinosaur on this list. I mainly wanted to highlight some commanders you could potentially play, and on top of that, other dinosaurs you can play in the 99 that are great includes. So with all that said, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and with that out of the way, thank you for stomping by.